Well, it's good to see each one of you this evening. Thank you again for inviting me to be part of your summer series. I appreciate very much the opportunity to be with you and share just a few things with you this evening about some things regarding our worship. I did not know, however, that one of my elders was going to bird dog me tonight to make sure that I made it out here. So we have an elders meeting Tuesday night, so maybe he can go back and report I did keep my word and come where I said I would be. Yes. Love Martin and Debbie so much. Appreciate them being here and others that are here. Good seeing Doug and Angela with us as well. Thank you for being here for the songs that have been led as well. I've been asked to speak on this time at this time about things related to worship and true worship or spiritual worship. And so I want to talk a few minutes about some things related to worship, and then we'll have three things in the end that I hope we'll make some practical application about. James will say in chapter 4 and verse 8, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. Worship is, I think, the basic concept that enables us to draw near to him. Therefore, worship of all that we consider should be considered with the most sober mind. When we think about approaching God and the throne of God, there is a regalness to coming before him, especially to formal worship like this. And so of all things that we do, worship then should have our greatest of attentions. When we think about some concepts related to worship, we think about the idea that worship involves a devotion, an adoration, a pouring out of our heart to God. And if we'll keep it in those terms, I think it will be helpful to us. I know we say accommodatively that we're going to church. And so we equate going to church with worship. But really, just for example, singing in and of itself is not worship. But singing with the heart certainly is worship. I might illustrate it this way. Parents have gone to watch one of their children play in a game. Let's say a football game. Watch their son play in a football game. And a good bit of the time they're at the football game, instead of watching their son play, they're down here doing this, texting on their phone, and then all of a sudden the crowd erupts and they missed the great play. But just because they were there like that doesn't mean they were involved at the football game. They might have had a local presence, but they were not present in the game. And so it is with our singing. Certainly, our worship should be more than just simply mouthing a few words, taking a pinch of an unsalted cracker, a jigger of grape juice, and then moving on and say, we went to church, we worshiped. What I would say is, wow, if that's what it is, we've missed a whole lot. The first passage I would lead us to is found in Matthew chapter 22, where you have the man that comes to ask Jesus about the question of eternal life. And Jesus gives the answer. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. I think that's the fundamental aspect of worship. Worship is the expression of our heart, soul, and mind directed to God. It's not just going somewhere. Worship is an activity. Worship is not passive. In fact, the term worship is found more often as a verb in the Bible than anything else. And if it's a verb, that means it's then active. Look at a few Psalms with me that emphasize this. Turn to Psalm chapter 66. Psalm chapter 66. Psalm chapter 66. And look at verses 1 and 2. Psalm chapter 66 and verses 1 and 2. Make a joyful shout to God, all the earth. Sing out the honor of his name. Make his praise glorious. Do you get the action words in that? Make a joyful shout to the Lord. Sing out honor to his name. You see the pouring out of heart there. Turn to chapter 71. Turn to chapter 71. Psalm chapter 71. And look at verses 23 and 24. Psalm chapter 71, verses 23 and 24. My lips shall greatly rejoice when I sing to you, and my soul, which you have redeemed, my tongue shall also talk of your righteousness all day long. You see the involvement of the heart there? My lips shall greatly rejoice. I shall sing to you. My lips, my soul, which you have redeemed, my tongue shall talk of your righteousness. Look again at Psalm 81. Look at Psalm chapter 81 and verse 1. Psalm chapter 81 and verse 1. Sing aloud to God, our strength. Make a joyful shout to the God of Jacob. And then finally turn to chapter 95. Psalm chapter 95. Psalm chapter 95 and look at verses 2 and verses 6 through 7. Psalm 95 verse 2. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully with the Lord. Verse 6. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand. Now, what you see in those particular psalms, I recognize is emphasizing the idea of singing. And singing is just something simple to use when we talk about worship to illustrate the idea that this is an activity. This is a pouring out. The truth of the matter is, man is going to worship someone or something. Man is a worshipful creature. I mean, for years, man has been searching for the fountain of youth. Indians had their happy hunting ground that they would worship. But often man's worship, however, was only an excuse to justify his immorality. Man is going to worship someone or something. So, since we are made in the image of God and we are his offspring, then we ought to pour our hearts out to him. I think that brings us to John chapter 4. To John chapter 4. Whenever you have this woman that Jesus meets at the well, and they begin to talk about water to drink. And that leads to a number of things, but it leads to the aspect of worship. And he says he's seeking those who would worship him in spirit and in truth. God is spirit, and he's seeking those to worship him in spirit and in truth. Now, I don't want to get too technical, and I don't want to try to cast an aspersion on somebody that might disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But when you have two adjectives that are joined by a conjunction, the second modifies the first. So instead of having two things, in spirit as we say one, truth as we say two, God is looking for those who worship him in a truly spiritual way. He's looking for true spiritual worship. God is spirit. He's looking for those who will give their spirit to him in a truly spiritual way. Now, pause. Should worship be according to truth? Yes. Should worship be in spirit? Yes. I'm just not sure that's the passage that establishes that. But if you think otherwise, that's fine. But when you think about truly spiritual worship that I've been asked to talk about this evening, that's where it begins. It begins that God is seeking those who will give themselves in a truly spiritual way. Worship, then, is spiritual. And I don't mean spiritual like somebody goes to the mountain and they see the stars and the moon, they see mountains and say, oh, that's just a spiritual experience. No, we're talking about something else. We're talking about communing with God. Communing with God. And that communion with God ought to leave us with a sense of refreshment, a sense of uplifting. In fact, the very term worship itself is an interesting term to look at. When you think about the etymology, the development of that term worship, it first came from worth, W-E-O-R-T-H was how it was spelled, ship, worth, ship. And that means one to whom you give honor or praise. Here is this person that was someone that was worth honor and praise, like a king, and you would come, and as the text said, you would bow down before him. You would give yourself in reverence to the one that was the king. And the imagery of that is that as you would bow down before him, you would kiss the hand. Worship is giving honor to he who is ship, to he who is the king. And you come and you bow down before him and you kiss the hand. So when you think about worship, we're thinking about communing with the Lord. And in doing that, we come and we bow down before him. Now, whether that is literal like this, or whether it's in our heart we bow down before him, that's okay. But what we're doing is we're coming and we're recognizing his worth. We recognize his worth. If I'm going to sell my house, which I'm not, just so Martin will know, I'm going to get it appraised. So I will know how much it's worth. So I will know its value. Well, if we are the offspring of God, he created us, then he has the right to tell us how to bow down before him, because he is worthy. He's worth our reverence. He's worth our pouring out honor unto him. So when we think about worship, we think about communing with God, we think about pouring our hearts, bowing down before him, before the king. I think those are some interesting and important concepts to get in place when we think about worship that is truly spiritual worship. It's not how loud things are. It's not how bright things are. It's not how great the PowerPoint is. It's about our hearts communing with God, and here's how serious that is. Leviticus chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu learned the hard way. They learned the hard way that God, when he designates his worship, is intolerant of that being violated. Because they offered strange fire to God. I don't know what the strange fire was, but they offered strange fire and it consumed them. Now, it may not be that something's going to reach out and consume us today like the fire did there. But they well got the point, and so did everyone around them. They got the point that God, when we commune with him, is a jealous God and wants our hearts given unto him. So, if we turn to Psalm 135, I think there's another interesting thing to observe in Psalm 135 and verses 15 through 18. Here I think is the importance of worship for us. Psalm 135, verses 15 through 18. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. Eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Nor is there breath in their mouths. Those who make them are like them. So is everyone who trusts in them. That moment ago, I said, man is a worshipful creature, And he's going to worship someone or something. And so since we're the offspring of God, we worship God. But I also said that at times, man's worship has just been an excuse for him to practice immorality. Psalm 135, verses 15 through 18 tell us, we're going to be like the one we worship. And here they worshiped idols, and they became like them. So with that thought, turn to Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. In Romans chapter 8, in verse 29, I think you have this marvelous statement that is the dream that God had for man in the beginning. And so we're talking about being like the one we worship. Okay? Psalm 135, verse 18, those who have idols shall be like them. Okay? Well, we're talking about worshiping God as his offspring. So Romans chapter 8, verse 29, for whom he foreknew, he predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. So when we come to worship God, that's where transformation helps take place. Not the only place, but that's where transformation takes place to make us like him. He wants truly spiritual worship because he is spirit. And so we come and we offer spiritual worship, truly spiritual worship to he who is spirit. And that makes us more like him. So worship is not about punching a clock. Worship is about coming before God and communing with God in order to be more like him. Now, that's a high-level overview of some things relative to worship that I think are significant for us to have in place when we think about some fundamental concepts of all that we ought to get right and strive to get right. It should be our worship to God because that's how we draw near to him. We bow before him, and that helps make us like him. That's why that's important. But what happens when we worship? That's what I want to ask now. What happens when we worship? I know at least in Dallas, things get really busy and congested. It can be a madhouse. A number of things interfere with our attention. They grab our attention. All day long, there's something going on that will compete for our attention. Turn to Psalm 123. Psalm 123. And by the way, the Psalms are a great place to go when we think about this idea of offering true worship to God. Look at Psalm 123 and look at verse 1. Unto you I lift up my eyes, O you who dwell in heavens. O you who dwell in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of the serpent look to the hand of their masters, and the eyes of the maid to the hand of the mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God until he has mercy on us. We get that. The eyes of the servant look to the master. The eyes of the maid look to her mistress. So our eyes look to the Lord until he has mercy on us. What happens when worship happens? It helps us give all of our attention to God. Because life under the sun is so busy, so hurried. Maybe it's that way by nature. Maybe it's that way because we enabled it to be that way. We helped it be that way. But nonetheless, life is congested. Our attentions are divided a dozen different ways. Our hearts are split. Our spirits that we would commune with God are so hectic in the press of life, the busyness of life. But worship is the time when we come together in an assembly like this in a formal way, in which our eyes are directed to the Lord and our Lord gets our undivided attention. And that helps us remember our place before God. In a world where man seems to be the king and seems to be the prince to rule the world, we find out how vapid, how empty that is. Because when we come to worship, we are put in our place before God and we recognize how great He is. Turn to Isaiah chapter 6 real quickly. Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 5. Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 5. After this expression that Isaiah gives in verse 3 about holy, holy, holy is the Lord, to whom the world is full of glory. And the posts of the door, verse 4, were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of the people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Question, can we say the first part of that? Can we say we're undone? We're people of unclean lips because we dwell in a land of unclean lips? But then he says, my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I'm reminded of the story of the little boy who wanted his father to take him to see an Elvis impersonator. And the crowd was so thick, the little boy was so small. He asked his dad, please put me on your shoulders. I can see the King. If I can't see the King, we might as well go home. Well, when we come before God, we've not come to see an Elvis impersonator. We've come to see the King. And that's why he could say what he did in the 123rd Psalm. The first thing that happens when worship happens is it helps us remember our place before God. It helps us give God our undivided attention. What else happens when worship happens? Well, not only do we have a congested life, life under the sun is messy too. It has all kinds of messes connected with it. People in their relationships get all kinds of messy things going in their relationships. And sometimes people have messy things in their relationship with God. Worship before God helps us cleanse that. You see, we come before God to feed the mind of God, to purge the imagination with the beauty of God, and to fill our heart with the love of God, and to come to God devoted to His will. When we come before God, it helps us clean the messes out of our lives. Turn again to the Psalms, chapter 122. Psalm chapter 122. Psalm chapter 122 and verse 1. Psalm chapter 122 and verse 1. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem has built a city that is compact together when tribes go up. Why would he say, I was glad when they said, let's go to the house of the Lord? Well, turn back to Psalm chapter 73. I think Psalm chapter 73 helps us get a little insight why the psalmist would say, I'm glad, because in Psalm chapter 73, you have Asaph that speaks. In the first part of the psalm, when Asaph speaks, he begins to be a little envious. He looks at the people in the world and begins to be a little envious of the people in the world. He sees the people in the world. He sees the strong men die with strength. He sees the strong men die with a smile on his face. He sees the wealthy prosper and the poor oppressed. And he almost stumbles and longs for that until you come to verse 15. If I had said, I will speak thus, behold, I would have been untrue to the generation of your children. When I thought how to understand this, it was too much for me Notice verse 17. Then I went into the sanctuary of God and I understood their end. Surely you set them in slippery places. You cast them down to destruction. Oh, how they are brought to desolation. As in a moment they are utterly consumed with terrors, as a dream one awakes. So, Lord, when you awake, you shall despise their image. Thus my heart was grieved, and I was vexed in mind. I was so foolish and ignorant. I was like the beast before you. Nevertheless, I'm continually with you. You uphold my right hand. You will guide me with your counsel. And he said, and afterward receive me to glory. When did Asa figure out the mess? But I went to the sanctuary of God. But I went to the house of God. What he's saying is, I opened the Word of God. I was able to see the world and life's mess from God's perspective. And it helped set everything in order for me. I'm not saying this is your issue. I'm saying this is a challenge for Christians. That when we see people in the world successful, and we're pushing from A to Z, just trying to make it to Z from A, and sometimes we get derailed and never make it that far, we ask, Lord, how is it that they have it so much better than we do? And the answer is they don't. And when we come to the house of God, we see from God's perspective who really is righteous and who really is special. I think that's important. I think when we come to the house of God, it helps us have a perspective from God's point of view. And when we come to the house of God, we open His Word and we have a perspective from God's Word's point of view. But I think there's a third thing. That when we come to the house of God, what we realize is we're not all alone. We're not alone. There are others who are trying to do what I'm trying to do to serve the Lord. And we come and we bring our hearts together. Let me pause. Let me put a peg here. I'm going to come back to this so you'll know I'm chasing a rabbit in a minute. And when I catch the rabbit, I'll come back and I hope it makes sense. I've been talking about formal worship like when we come together here. But I also think there's a worship that is indicative of our daily lives. And if we miss that time of worship in our daily lives, then when we come together like this, there's going to be an emptiness. This matters because we in our daily life have been communing with God individually. If I may use this illustration. I know y'all know what a potluck is. You bring your pot, I bring my pot. And then look, we have several pots full of food. Well, what contributes to the overall potluck? Your pot, my pot, everybody else's pot. We always say, if you don't have a pot to bring, come on, we got plenty of pots. Well, here's worship. You prepare your heart, you prepare your heart, you prepare your heart, and we put all of our hearts together. Because we individually have prepared our hearts together. In this mess we live in, we go to our closet and spend time with God. And because we spent time with God, now when we come together, because our hearts have been prepared individually, it then means something formally when we come like this. But if we haven't been preparing our hearts individually, then we're going to have nothing to contribute when we come like this. Now, caught the rabbit, pick up the peg, come back to the point. That helps us realize we're not alone. Now the text I want to emphasize. Turn to Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews chapter 10. I know you know this passage like the back of your hand. I just want to offer something I think that is really important to see in this passage. And maybe you've seen it before. And if so, then we're on the same wavelength. If not, then may I share something with you maybe from a perspective you haven't seen if that's the case. In verse 24, he said, let us consider one another to stir up to love and good works. That word stir can be used positively and negatively. But it simply means boil over. boil over with love and good works for one another. And then he says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another so much the more as you see the day approaching. And characteristically, we use that passage to say, don't forsake an assembly. Except that's not what that just said. It didn't say don't forsake an assembly. It said don't forsake assembling. The act of assembling. But even then it doesn't say don't forsake the act of assembling. It's telling us what we should do when we do assemble together. So what you have in this passage is you have a figure of speech. And the figure of speech is a not but construction. Now, in the Greek language, they not have good, better, best. How would you then say, if this is good, this is better? Well, you'd choose something you know is good and you compare that to better and say, not forsaking the act of assembling, that's good not to do that. But better is when you do assemble, exhort one another so much more as you see the day approaching. So here's the deal. If you bring your preparation, I bring my preparation, then what we're ready to do, what we are ready to do is we're ready then to exhort one another as we have come in the act of assembling together. I don't know if y'all have to do this here. I know we do it at home. And I know we have to do it. It's a vexing thing to do, but I know we have to do it. We have guys at the back that are reading the back of people's heads to see if they're here or not. We have a little blank to check. So we can see if somebody's here or not. And we look at that and say, well, if they're not here over a period of time, that may or may not tell us something. That little empty blank doesn't tell me a thing about why somebody's not here. All I know is they're not here. But it's an indication of something. They're not here. And there's an indication for me. I might want to check on them. But here's the real thing. The reason I come is not so I can have a check so one of my elders won't call me because I have a blank space. The reason I come is so that I can offer something to the pot. As you commune, I have communed, and now we commune together, and we what? We stir each other with love and good works, and we exhort one another. Now, if instead of placing the emphasis on not forsaking the assembly, don't miss getting your block checked, your space checked, and put the emphasis on why we do come. We come why? We come to exhort one another by stirring each other love and good works. That word exhort's an interesting word. It means to urge someone. To urge someone. Well, the illustration of that is, if Paul is standing here and he comes up and I put my arm around him like this, and I pull him in close like that. That's an idea. I put my arm in close and say, Paul, I just want to encourage you to do an ABCD. I just really want to encourage you. If you're at the store and some stark stranger comes up and puts their arm around you like that and tries to pull you in, what are you going to do? We're going to pull back, right? I don't know you. I don't know you. But because I know Paul, I come up to here and I put my arm around him and pull him in. He doesn't pull back. And I do that to try to bring him close, to stir him, and to encourage him. And so when we greet one another, and we do this, or however we do that, what we're doing is we're pulling each other close to say, I'm related to you and you're related to me, and we've come to commune before God together, and I want to do the best I can to exhort you. I want to do the best I can to move you. I want to be a positive influence in your life to come before the King today, so we both can say we've bowed and kissed the hand of the King today. But that begins not here. That begins in my closet. That begins with my communing with God. That begins with my daily devotion. However that daily devotion is, that's how that begins. That begins with my daily prayers. We talked about worship is God-centered, focused on God. Jesus is all the world to me, we sing. But then we also sing, Be with me, Lord. Because if Jesus is all the world, then we want to be with people who hold Jesus as all the world. And that helps me be better. And helps me realize I'm not the only one alone. That means I've got somebody else that can now put their arm around me and pull me in close together. Worship is powerful. Powerful worship produces godly lives. Worship is powerful. So I want to ask you a question then, and that is, what compels you to worship? Paul said, the love of Christ compels me. It moves me. What moves you to worship? What ought to be the thing that moves us to worship is, I can't wait to get here because I can't wait to see you and share with you what I've learned in community with God. And I want us to draw closer together as so much the more. The day they saw approaching was the destruction of Jerusalem. The day we see approaching is when the Lord returns again. It helps keep us focused. It helps clear the mess. It helps us realize we're not alone. I had a young lady years ago that wrote this poem. I just want to share it with you as we conclude. Did we worship God this morning when we gathered with our friends? Did we really worship God, or did we just pretend? Did we worship God as we should? Did we do the best we could? Did we worship as a trend? Did we worship or just pretend? Did we come to church this morning that we might be seen of men? Did we worship God or just pretend? When the prayer was led this morning, did we ask forgiveness of our sins? Did we really talk to God, or did we just pretend? When the lesson was presented, did it really sink within? Or did we do our best to listen? Or did we just pretend? When the blessing had been asked and the bread and wine were passed, did we remember Jesus as he met the bitter cup? Did we worship or did we just pretend? When the collection plate was passed, did we put a plenty in? Did we truly please God, or did we just pretend? On the resurrection morning, will the Master let us in? Will he say, depart from me, all you did was just pretend? When we reach that sad occasion, it'll be too late, our knees to bend, too late to be sorry. But all we did was just pretend. Now, I'll give you my 2 cents about that. I don't think God's people just pretend. I think there are some of God's people that can just pretend. But when you come here like this tonight, you're not pretending. You're here because you want to be. Because you have something to bring to this. When we gather at Campbell Road, Sundays and Wednesdays, the people that are there, that are always there, they're not pretending. And some that aren't there aren't pretending either. They're just something else that interfered, that they had a choice that's different. And they would choose different if they could. I give God's people a lot of credit being very serious about truly spiritual worship. And I appreciate you inviting me to be part of that this evening. I don't know the condition of anyone here, but if there's something we can do that whereby you need encouragement and something that can be said or done, then once you come, as together we stand and sing.